years after James Naismith from Almont, Ontario invented it, basketball was being played by hundreds of millions of people around the world.
I promise I'll never swear again. I'll never get another technical. I'll never trash talk.
Not that you really hate me.
Oh, no, John, I don't hate you. I just hate basketball.
Welcome to the 5th episode of The Boys Who Would Be Critics, the All's Fair in Love and Basketball edition. This week we'll be discussing the new movie from Pepsi of all studios, Uncle Drew, starring Kyrie Irving and a host of former NBA and WNBA greats. After that, we'll be building our own basketball team out of what we think are the 5 best or 5 most cohesive basketball movies, and we'll be pitching our teams against each other to see how they will stack up. Joining me, as always, on the podcast is my good friend Damoon Kapoor, and my name is Brendan Jones. So let's dive in. Damoon, how are you?
Brendan, thank you for the assist. Yeah, so what do you consider us basketball connoisseurs?
We are suffering Raptor fans.
Suffering.
Ever suffering Raptor fans. Yeah, I'm. This is the kind of basketball I want to be talking about, which is films that take place in an entirely fictional universe where I don't need to watch LeBron James or anyone else in the East to spank our team every time playoff season comes. So this has been therapeutic for me.
Yeah, therapy's a good way of looking at it. I mean, we haven't had a sports movie like this in a while.
Like Uncle Drew.
Uncle Drew, wasn't it wonderfully? Not even wonderfully. I'm just gonna stop that. Nostalgic. Then you're like, wow, this is a movie that I expected to be made in the 90s, early 2000s. How are you here?
It does feel like a movie out of its time in a lot of ways, in that it's a small budget summer release that's built around a single gimmick, which is we got a whole bunch of, one current NBA player, a whole bunch of former NBA players, most of whom work on TNT now. We dressed them up in old people makeup, and we built a movie about them assembling the old team and bringing them back together for one last hurrah. Yeah, this feels like a late 90s, early 2000s summer comedy.
But there's it's gritted in realism and regretfulness of the past. It's interesting we're getting movies in that revisional nature, wherein we have to apologize for the past and correct the mistakes, like Last Ride on This. When movies of the late 90s and early 2000s, when you had movies with Shaq's Kazam or Like Mike or Angels in the Outfield, there's a fantasy quality to these films that are being made. There's a larger-than-life persona. In the movies nowadays, we've just been grounded to the roots. We know where these characters come from, and the traumas of the past have carried on to the present. And so many of these films have these reoccurring themes. And this was one of those. It's not a fantasy. We don't get, in our comedy, you know what I mean? I don't know.
This is a much deeper read on Uncle Drew than
I'm not reading Uncle Drew. I'm just saying, ever since, let's say, I'm not going to blame Apatow, but the comedies of, improvisational comedy where comedy is grounded. I mean, there is maybe some fantastical elements. There is, a nightmare sequence in this movie. But we don't get fantasy elements, or, let's say more high concept than we do necessarily with these kind of...
Describing this as high concept?
Yeah, no, I'm saying, we don't get high concept anymore. My argument is more... my argument is that necessarily we don't get high concept comedies anymore. And a lot of those 90s kind of basketball-driven vehicles, like Space Jam. What is the premise of Space Jam?
You're right. This movie is its premise.
Yeah.
You see the trailer, you know what this movie is, and I think in some ways it's almost worth calling us... it's the closest we've gotten to a farce in a long time, which is the themes, the plotting. It's all set up so we can get to the jokes. It's all so we can get to the absurd and the goofy and the silly, which is not how we structure comedies typically anymore.
No. The situational comedies in TV, not in TV, but in TV actually the situational comedy is coming back a little bit, but argument more so in movies necessarily. But we don't have comedies like this. Although this year has been pretty good for comedies in terms of comedies I've seen so far, where there are situational elements and goofy things happen. If you've seen Blockers this year or Game Night, they take a simple element and then extrapolate them. They get into crazier, fantastical scenarios that you didn't imagine when they started at the beginning.
You're right. We've had almost a decade of very grounded, very thoughtful comedies that are, apart from a few of the Talladega Nights type of Anchorman films, no, this is, we've mostly been in the vein of the Superbads, the Knocked Up, the Trainwreck, basically anything Judd Apatow has had his hands on, which is almost the entire comedy landscape.
40-Year-Old Virgin.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch 40-Year-Old Virgin theaters? I still remember watching it.
40-Year-Old Virgin, I still think is Judd Apatow's best movie.
It is.
Mm-hmm. But before we get to a full segue of Judd Apatow, Uncle Drew, there's a lot to discuss in this movie. mainly the fact that I enjoyed this film a lot more. I shouldn't say a lot more, because I expected to like this movie. I liked it even more than I thought I would.
I thought it was better, and it wasn't as egregious in terms of the marketing that I thought it was going to deploy. I thought there was going to be more, a litany of, a barrage, if you will, of product placement coming at you. I thought Pepsi would market a new product that hasn't been released yet that would kind of be involved in this film, like whatever Pepsi Max Squared 2 would be, or whatever you want to call it. But no, there's only one egregious shot in the film, I would argue, that is a product placement.
Okay.
And something that I would argue, bringing it back to late 90s and early 2000s, that was there for like a split second, but I want to watch it again to see if I actually saw it or if I'm going crazy. Because maybe that's indicating what's going to come in the future.
Okay. No, I feel almost embarrassed to say this because I know a lot of people on Twitter have talked about the product placement of Pepsi. I didn't notice it.
I noticed Budweiser product placement more than Pepsi.
The most egregious thing I thought was the Air Jordans at the Foot Locker scene, which is because we have an entire scene about them.
Actually, I argue that wasn't even the worst part. Mine to me was when Uncle Drew, a 70-something-year-old man, is putting on new Kyrie shoes, and there's like a deliberate like single of it. That to me was the most egregious.
That's probably how you convinced Kyrie to do this.
No, exactly.
Not entirely, but...
Yeah. No, what I was arguing was, I swear, when Shaq was in the sequence when he was flipping the TVs in the hospital, for a split second, the What's Up commercial from the late 90s Budweiser's was in there. And I was like, Are they bringing that back? And if they are, that movie started it. I swear it was in there. It was like there for like a split second where the guy was on the couch, he was about to do the What's Up, and then he switched it before it happened. Oh. And if anyone's younger than like 20... What?
Yeah, no, I
20
completely
something?
missed that. That's not...
What? The What's Up commercials?
No, I mean, like, I missed that
Okay.
in the movie. It was everywhere.
Yeah. I swear, when Shaq was changing the channels, the What's Up commercial was in there.
Oh.
If anyone is watching this and hasn't seen Uncle Drew yet, confirm for me, please, when Shaq's flipping the TV in the hospital.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, tweet at us at Boys Be Critics, and yeah, that would be very helpful. No, I didn't notice that at all. But I barely noticed Pepsi machines, basically because this is set at gyms and gas stations and going across America. There are Pepsi stations, so
like when you
travel, it didn't seem that didn't blow me away by a.
Okay. Here's a question for you.
Okay.
We're both Canadian and we've done American road trips. I've done a couple. You've done them. When you go on American road trips, what is the iconography in your head in terms of product placement and things that are ubiquitous in America? Because this film had a road trip element to it, right?
It is a road trip film.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when you think of America, what do the road trip elements do?
Most of my road trips would go through upstate New York and rural Pennsylvania, and my memories are generally about the perpetual reoccurrence of Applebee's, Cracker Barrel, and like the same 4 restaurants that permeate every small town in the country.
Bob Evans. Do you get Bob? I go through the Midwest a lot. You ever go through Bob Evans at all?
No.
No. Oh my God, Bob.
Cracker Barrel, a lot of Applebee's.
Yeah.
And
Waffle House.
There's a lot of Waffle House. What is that? What is the gas station that runs all through the upper east and like down to the south?
Not Tesco.
Sheets.
Okay.
I always do a stop at Sheets and get the really bad burgers, and like they have a pulled pork burger that you fill up on gas, you get a pork burger to go. You do it once every trip.
Yeah.
That's my rule.
No, that's what I meant. Like I didn't realize that, but the reason I brought that up is like when you go late night, the one thing lighting those gas stations outside the fluorescent bulbs above are those Pepsi machines. They're almost those warning mosquito lights that come towards you try to like stop before you buy something you would regret. So no, I didn't actually notice that. The Budweiser, that was up thing, and there was another ad when he came out of the subway when he had all his clothes with him. There was a big Budweiser ad behind it. That was more noticeable to me than anything Pepsi was in the film. Maybe I'm just an alcoholic.
I don't know. I think at this point we have spent 5 minutes trying to discuss all the product placement in the movie while saying there's not a lot of egregious product placement in this movie.
I mean, people forget how much we remember the good nostalgia of the 90s and 80s. We forget how much we were targeted into that. No one remembers how bad some of the product placement.
How Subway was in every Adam Sandler movie?
Are like Popeyes in like Little Nicky. I think it was Popeye. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, it would make more sense if it was Church if it was Little Nicky.
Oh, that would have been smart, but it was an Adam Sandler movie, so you didn't get anything clever like that.
No. But, yeah, Space Jam had a ton of product placement in it, and was an entire movie as a ploy to get him back out of retirement, right? So.
Yeah.
No. So, yeah, back to it. This movie wasn't, in that regard.
It doesn't feel like a corporate cash grab. It doesn't feel like this, like, phoned-in thing that you used to get when you would pair up a bunch of, like, when you would get an NBA talent in the offseason to do a movie, i.e. the Shaq films. This film has like has a certain amount of heart, a lot of joy, and enough technical competence that it's a really enjoyable film. these guys pass as old people. They work both as like charismatic on-screen talents. I think almost across the board. I liked every one of these players. Kyrie as Uncle Drew is really fun, really great, and I love the supporting cast. Nick Kroll. Nick Kroll is crazy in this, but Tiffany Haddish is excellent. And I apologize because I'm blanking on this gentleman's name from Get Out. Lil Rel Howery. He is the lead of this film, and he's fun. He works. It all kind of has this mad, cohesive nature to it, and it's fun.
The easiest way, I teach you in film school's kids, keep it simple, stupid. This movie just did that.
Yes.
It was just a very simple, straightforward, I'm a guy, I need to win this tournament. Very much like those movies from the 90s and early 2000s.
How have we not gotten one of those?
People. Yeah.
How have we not gotten one of those movies built around the Rucker yet, though? It seems like it's just fruit. It's just low-hanging fruit, and it's perfect.
It's one of those movies where you could tell an actual basketball fan directed it as opposed to a contract director coming in and directing it. So, speaking of the acting, I've never seen Chris Webber act before. I was impressed by Chris Webber and Lisa Leslie. Both of those pairings were probably my favorite two out of the film.
I am in 100% agreement. I think Chris Webber has 50% of the laughs in this movie, and all of the biggest laughs are in that church scene, I think.
Oh, yeah.
The church scene is why this movie is worth recommending, almost.
Mm-hmm.
Without giving too many of those jokes away, Chris Webber steals this. He's really good.
Chris Webber, and again, I'm going to give more credit to Lisa Leslie. She actually has good comedic timing and delivery on her lines. And I was like, I've never seen Lisa Leslie act before, but she's killing it.
And you buy them as a couple, too.
Oh, absolutely. I thought they were. I went back home and researched. I'm like, are they actually married? And they're not. But they were good.
They work. I really also enjoyed Nate Robinson. Nate Robinson.
Boots. Yeah, he was great.
He's the fro they put him in is ridiculous. But again, I bought him as an old man. And no, everyone they cast in this film has a natural charisma, is likable. I've forgotten how likable Shaq is because I don't usually enjoy him on the TNT broadcast. Yeah. But he's fun in this. He's not up to par with some of the other people, despite him being probably the most seasoned of like NBA stars who get movie deals.
Do you think Shaq had the biggest B subplot because he demanded the contract because of his ego, or do you think it's something that just kind of happened?
I think if you are setting up this movie, I think Shaq was number 2 on your list. You got to book Kyrie, and the second person you're going to is Shaquille O'Neal, because it makes sense. And so I think that kind of naturally came about.
Mm-hmm. I was actually kind of surprised by Aaron Gordon. I didn't know he could act. He had some pretty good elements as Casper Jones.
Casper Jones.
As his character's name, yeah. But, yeah, no, I was... You know what it reminded me of is almost... You ever watch those Stephen Chow films? Like Shaolin Soccer, or Kung Fu Hustle, where these characters are going through like some sort of tournament, or they had to get like the old people back together and they have their special skills.
Right.
It reminded me of those old, those Kung Fu, but I haven't seen any old Kung Fu films, but I'm talking specifically about those two, where like there's a young character who's kind of goofy and fun. He has to go find the older people, and the older people kind of help him through the certain things, and the old teaches the new, and the new teaches the old, sort of thing.
No, this is not a film that is similar to a lot of the American, the stuff we would get from an American studio. The director of this film, Charles Stone III, did make Mr. 3000 with Bernie Mac, which is also a film about an aging vet lacing it up one more time to go back to baseball in that film. But no, this kind of just like strange, goofy farce feels almost kind of like something you would have gotten like 1970s British TV when like there was the Monty Python shows and what was that other John Cleese show? It doesn't matter.
Faulty Towers.
Faulty Towers. It feels kind of Faulty Towers-esque, but with towering black men.
It has elements with pacing and some of the stuff. Some of the jokes don't land or go as far as you want it necessarily to go. You're right. And there's not as many deep digs in terms of, I'm a real big basketball fan. I really got that. There's one or two, I think, involving Chris Webber. I was the only person who laughed in the theater at that joke.
I got one story to say about the Chris Webber. There is a Chris Webber timeout joke that I loved. But I was also the only person who laughed at this movie. But I laughed again because I was sitting beside a mother who had taken her daughter, who was about 10 or 12. And the mother, after hearing me laugh, leans over and explained the joke to her daughter to say Chris Webber forgot he was out of timeouts in the NCAA.
It's one of those low risk, high reward sort of things. I think the budget was what? 10, 50 million maybe?
It looks like, yeah.
And they've probably already recouped it, and they've already got a flat, and whatever they make now is just a bonus. And it's the type of film that people will probably rent more. Mm-hmm. The type of film they'll find on Redbox, if people still use Redbox. It'll be on Netflix. Yeah. People will use it as that term thing to come back to.
It's a perfect Netflix movie, actually.
Yeah, it's It has its flaws. There are some weak moments in it. There are elements where you wish you'd take it again further. The second act kind of drags because you wish the set pieces and the jokes and the gags in the first that you mentioned were just a little more extreme or farcical or had better written jokes behind it.
I'm surprised you say the second act, because I thought the movie really takes... it's a little bit of a dry spell until you actually get to Uncle Drew, which is the first 25 minutes of the film, which is just setting up the Lil Rel Howery character trying to get a team together and being desperate. I thought those 30 minutes really kind of slowed down.
I'd say like the back half of the first act and the beginning of the second act. Because I liked how it's set up with him being an orphanage and basketball, the one thing at a time together. The idea of team supplements the idea of family, because you're a cohesive unit. And then it kind of, from there, to me, got a little bit weaker, then got stronger with the basketball scenes, because an underrated component of some basketball movies, or which basketball movies have the best directed basketball scenes, which I guess we'll get into.
Did you have a problem with all the like individual we're bringing the team back together scenes where they have to go to each player, or
some of them dragged to me. I wasn't crazy about like Boots's and.
Oh, I like the I like the
idea that he's just a silent dude in here. And what brings him back out of like his catatonic state is bringing the team back together, and then
I thought they had two really good jokes with Boots too, with the. When they're introducing him. No, I didn't have a problem with those areas of it. Mostly because I know who these players are, and it's just there is a joy of seeing people pop up in these stories. It's kind of become the secret to Marvel movies.
Exactly, it's kind of a fan service. But the Shaq one wasn't bad because it had one of the better jokes when Uncle Drew was like, "Oh, that's the only free throw you ever made," when he gave him the punch. Mm-hmm. But I guess that was like that's the second in joke that you would like the deepest second in joke that you would get for this sort of film. Yeah, I like there is flaws, but I like how simple and earnest it was. Mm-hmm. There is an element of just appreciating what the story is and the story that you love telling. There are director films, and I'm not saying this is a passion project, but necessarily there are some passion projects that fail. But to me, an inherent guilty joy is I love watching passion projects because the earnestness and the love of a director telling a story comes out so much in it that you can't help to, for an element, even regardless if it fails or not, it still rings to you. Like I was just watching, going completely off the rails, but Wim Wenders' Until the End of the World. It was his passion project to direct this ultimate end of era road movie, and it drags as character problems. It is a little pretentious in that regard, but there's still an earnest charm to it. And this film had like the same thing to it that I appreciated.
What I think is true in that is not just it's the passion project of the director where there's love for the game. There's love for basketball in the cast. These are people whose lives were built around this game. And when you have all these scenes where Uncle Drew is throwing the ball to these people and they're grabbing it, you feel it. You actually believe that Nate Robinson, Reggie, when they catch the ball, they love this game, and it comes through in their performances as goofy and as absurd, and they're under layers of makeup. But that love is there in every one of the cast members, and it makes it real, and you get the shivers of oh yeah, the moments when you would just go out and play pickup ball with your friends. It almost gets that idea across even better than Spike Lee's basketball movie, which tried to build entire montages around the ideas of people going out and shooting hoops by themselves and with their friends. This movie had elements of that as well, but I think in some ways even stronger.
So you're not old, but in your high school days, did you play basketball?
Yes.
Did it bring you to that element of camaraderie? Did it bring you back to youth, kind of when you guys after practice went to all get a burger or a shake or something, or hang out after a game?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, there is an intangible beauty to playing sports when you're young that I think transcends the sport itself and the lessons it teaches you. The experience of it, competing with your friends and forming a team and going out into battle, is really special, and it holds deep in your subconscious, I think. And this film brings it out and understands it.
Yeah. No, it's a movie in an era where movies are necessary products to get to the next product, to the next product. There's a movie come out ironically built around a product that actually is earnest in what it's delivering. We live in a weird, contradictory world. But that's what this movie is, if that makes sense.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a movie made by Pepsi, built off of Pepsi ads where Kyrie Irving would dress up as an old man. And somehow they were able... It almost in some ways feels like an SNL sketch when they would take Wayne's World and then turn Wayne's World into a movie.
Night at the Roxbury.
There were really bad SNL sketches turned into movies. This feels like a good SNL sketch that got stretched to feature length, and they made it work.
Exactly. That is a good podcast episode you could do. Forgotten 90s SNL skits that returned to movies that no one remembers.
Coneheads.
Not even even more obscure than Coneheads. I don't remember the name, but there's a couple of them that exist out there.
Okay.
That are just gone. Because I loved Coneheads as a kid. My parents loved Coneheads as a kid. I don't know why, but I always remember when we did those, when we went, like, again, back to the college talk with previous episode, we put Coneheads on.
I never saw Coneheads, but I always remembered the cover at video stores.
If you guys want Brendan to do an entire retrospective of 90s failed SNL skit movies that are forgotten by history, tweet at us, and we'll do a whole podcast starting with Coneheads.
At Boys Be Critics. There was one other thing that this movie taught me that I didn't know was true about myself, but I have just there's something just innately funny to me about watching really tall people dance. And I have to say, I think this movie has one of my favorite dance battles in the canon of film history. In part because there are not many good cinematic dance battles. This one's really fun.
Okay, now I'm worried. Yeah, the dance battle in the movie was good.
Like, unless you're going back into, like, unless you're going back to, like, Step Up or films that are built around having, like, really cool... This actually had just, like, a dance scene that, again, felt like just the idea of, like, no, dance is fun because of the environment dance, not because of how cool you can look and how much Channing Tatum can flash his abs.
Yeah, I mean, the dance battle in the movie is good, because it was less about trying to beat the person they're dance battling with, but rather connecting them on some sort of level, right? And that's what this dance battle sort of did. It was a good dance battle. I mean, I'm not one of those people who runs a tally in my head in terms of what are my rankings in terms of dance battles. I don't have watch mode counter in my head. Yeah. So, no, I thought it was good. I mean, there were elements in the film I wish that were better, but I was still, like you said, pleasantly surprised in regard to how simple but true the filmmaking was behind it.
Yeah. There's one nightmare scene in the early stages of the film that I kind of wish just really turned into, like, an absurdist dream sequence nightmare. Where, in addition to just getting a little bit of, like, character backstory, you got something that had jokes in and of itself that were about the nightmare. But a film like this, you don't want to nitpick apart too much. There are some really bad one-liners where Uncle Drew is giving him, like, advice, and he essentially just quotes the posters that you would see in your elementary school boards about you miss 100% of the shots you take. Mm-hmm. Where you I watched that scene and went, like, this feels like the scene that you write the first time around and go, we'll get back to it and we'll fix it in the rewrite, and they just never fixed it.
Yeah, it was good in that capacity. I'm curious if they do make a sequel, necessarily where they'll take it. There's Rutgers and there's Drew League. I think there's Pro-Am or the one in Seattle. So there is a regard. They can take it to further things, but I wonder what the controversy there would be. Like, I imagine a sequel could happen when they had a rival team at Rutgers, which went off to be better, which is another old group of people, and they have to face, like, old group with old group. I'm trying to think who would be the other 90s old people. Like, can you imagine if you convinced Kobe to come back and go against Shaq, but, like, an old man makeup, and then try to get, like, a Karl Malone or Gary Payton?
Oh my gosh, I think you put your finger on it. That's what you do. You make the biggest in-joke you can, where you build a team where it's LeBron against Kyrie, Kobe against Shaq. You bring back Jalen Rose as an old man to play against Chris Webber, because they still don't speak to each other. Yeah. And then, because Kyrie's a flatter, it literally takes place on the end of the earth with, like, all the water falling off.
Like in Seattle, just on the harbor. Like, that's where you're going back to Seattle. In the end, they revealed they're bringing back a franchise to Seattle.
Yeah. Dear young blood, where the world ends.
Yeah. That is what you...
Uncle Drew would work as a flat earther more than Kyrie Irving.
Yeah. But it is an interesting movie to watch, not necessarily if you don't see it in theaters, but if you are a basketball fan, or you're just going to show your kids, which is earnest, and it's not necessarily something that is, I don't want to say cynical, but it doesn't feel like a byproduct or a product that serves something else. Yeah. Ironically, again, which I keep saying, is a movie based on a product, it's sentimental but earnestly true. It's weird.
Yeah, no, I'm impressed they were able to stretch this premise to 90 minutes and not make it feel long. If they did a sequel, it would be a challenge to fill another 90 minutes of content with these characters, but for what it is, yeah, it's really a lot of fun. It'd be a really good, like, we're having some friends over, we're gonna pop this on Netflix.
That's the interesting thing, though. I'm trying to think now. None of those 90s sports feel-good movies ever had a sequel. Think of one. Angels in the Outfield or Space Jam.
Angels in the Outfield had straight-to-video.
Really?
I think so, and I think they're trying to. There's been talks about a Space Jam sequel forever.
Or did Mike have one? Oh, the only one I can think about is like Air Bud. They have the monkey one with Most Valuable Private with him as the goalie, but I've never seen it. But that's not even a sequel; more of a spin-off. It's interesting that none of these sport films that were marketed towards kids had one.
All you were doing in listing all these films off is making me realize how good Uncle Drew is in comparison to the films it is similar to.
I don't know if this is a hot take, but Uncle Drew is better than Space Jam. We think nostalgically of how good Space Jam is. Space Jam is not a good film. It is not.
I now want to go rewatch Space Jam and put that hot take to the test.
But we'll segue now to the other basketball films that we've seen.
That's right. Space Jam being one of them, but perhaps maybe it did not make either of our starting lineups. So the goal of this challenge that we let up, because we did not do a single old film, we decided we would watch as many films that touch on the subject as basketball as possible, and we are going to try and pick not quite a top 5 to say these are the best films, but these are the 5 films that are on our team. We are making a 5-man rotation of basketball movies to play. How would you like to present this? Do you want to go one for one, or should we lay out? Should I lay out 5 and you match?
I'm the wild card, so I didn't even necessarily do the 5 things. I just watched a bunch of movies, and I will talk about my movies. If they fill in the parameters of a top 5 starting 5 in terms of small forward and power forward and point guard, then I'll adjust that accordingly.
Okay.
But I did see a bunch, and I will talk about them. So if you like to start with you actually doing the homework,
Do these films serve a purpose on a team in any capacity, or do you just want to chat about them?
I kind of want to chat about them, but I can discuss them in a quote unquote position capacity.
Okay. Because I built a starting 5.
Okay, you can do
I have a starting 5 of basketball movies, and I'll let you jump in because I will assume you have seen most of them. Starting at point guard, this is my team captain, and it's Love and Basketball, directed by Gina Prince Blythewood. In part because your point guard has to be your heart of this team. Love and Basketball is not the best movie on my roster, but it is a movie that is just filled with heart and took a lot of just grit and determination to make. This is a movie that is about a female basketball player. This is a black melodrama made by a black woman in the early 2000s when there was no market for black female directors or movies about black women. It's particularly one who is not, particularly the lead of this film, who I don't know the name of. She's not a conventional Hollywood talent. She looks like a basketball player and is completely believable in the role. This movie, like a point guard, is smaller than it would be the smallest person on the team. This seems like it got made on a very limited budget, but it has so much heart, so much love. The relationships that sets up in this film are so powerful and so strong. There's a single line in the first 5 minutes where you see the film takes place over a series of points in these two characters' lives, and you see the young man as an 8-year-old kid, or maybe he's in his early teens, and he says, "I can't do this shit," and his father goes, "Watch your language," and you think the father's about to lecture him about profanity, or he says, "What did I say about that word?" And the word is can't, not the profanity. And he gives him this spiel about why men never say can't, because if you say can't, you're not a man. And in that single, 30 seconds of dialogue, there is more character work than there was in the entirety of Jurassic World. Have you seen Love and Basketball?
So, if you have a date night and you're feeling like we should watch something that's romantic and beautiful, coming back to Gina Prince Blythewood. She is an incredibly underrated director.
Yes.
If you are lucky enough, or if you have a chance to, and you have a nice romantic night, watch the movie Beyond the Lights. And I cannot stress this enough. I'm going to go back to Love and Basketball. Yeah. It is a better version of The Bodyguard. It is a movie if it was directed by a white male. We would hear about her so many times. She would give him the opportunity to direct at least 10 franchise superhero films. But unfortunately, she kind of slips beyond the cracks. She is actually now directing the Cloak and Dagger show for Marvel. Yeah, she directed the pilot for that. But I really like Life and Basketball. And that line you said was right. Again, going back to Ernest, she has an appreciation for basketball because I think she played basketball herself. She actually likes the game, and when she directs sequences in that film, you could tell that she likes it. And her character work is so subtly beautiful between the two, the chemistry between the two of the leads. And yeah, the actor who plays him also, I think, plays the president in 24, I forget his name, Palmer. He's great. And that character development that you mentioned is a unique point.
That little scene is just so much more than you get in half the major studio films that you see today.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a film that takes the innocence of childhood and expands upon it because it's a movie about a series of vignettes and flashbacks, and you go back to forward between a bunch of scenarios. And has this great ending where it's double or nothing. And if you watch it, you understand what I mean by double or nothing. So,
I think what you touched on, which is going to become a recurring point in all of these films, which is when you have a director that loves the game itself.
yeah.
The way this film speaks about basketball, it understands the game, the way the scenes play out, it makes sense as sports strategy.
Yeah.
And we watched, in preparation for this, a William Friedkin film. William Friedkin is a great director. Directed a film with Nick Nolte called Blue Chips. And there is no love for the sport of basketball in that film.
Yeah.
It is just a joyless, bland exercise in comparison to Love and Basketball and the other films that I picked.
Yeah, it's weird, because William Friedkin, if you've ever watched The French Connection, To Live and Die in LA, and Sorcerer. Sorcerer is a very underrated film from him. Another passion project he directed. He got a ton of money to make it, but it was almost the death knell of 70s independent American cinema, where it flopped terribly. But if you have a chance to watch it, there's a sequence on a bridge that I won't spoil, but it's one of the greatest American action set pieces made. I'm just saying that in general. You have to watch this sequence just for the film is worth it just to watch the sequence. And the interesting thing about Blue Chips is there's no narrative thrust with anything. And William Friedkin is kind of known for his narrative thrust. The urgency of how into the scenarios and characters and the way things go about. The other thing is William Friedkin is great in terms of music, right? We all know the iconic Exorcist theme. His soundtrack to Live and Die is great. His soundtrack to Sorcerer is way ahead of the time. But the music in this film is just contrived and forced. The narrative isn't really there. It bounces, like you said, back between scenarios where necessarily it doesn't feel like he cares about what is happening, but almost like he's a contract for hire.
It feels like a movie that's been phoned in. We probably shouldn't talk about it more. It's not worth it.
No.
We've discussed it more than William Friedkin discussed it, I think.
Yes, but if you have a chance, go watch William Friedkin Sorcerer. Or To Live and Die in LA, because I feel like a lot of people haven't seen that William Friedkin film, and the cinematographer had actually just recently passed away, Robbie Mueller, who's an amazing cinematographer.
Or you can watch My Shooting Guard, which is Spike Lee's He Got Game, starring Denzel Washington and Ray Allen. Ray Allen gives one of the best performances I have ever seen from a sports athlete in a movie. It is just raw and honest, and it works so well in this movie. And the reason this is My Shooting Guard is because this is the film that has the cinematic equivalent of footwork. This is your Kobe, your James Harden. This has moves and technique, and what I'm talking about is not just the cinematography, but the editing. This is a beautifully edited film that has surreal elements to it. It has sequences that have multiple flashbacks that take on an aspect where you're not seeing events as they actually happen, but you're seeing events as they feel in the moment, which is such an underrated quality of Spike Lee's work, which is just how well his films are paced, how well they are cut. There is a wonderful performance from Denzel Washington and a beautiful relation between Ray Allen and Denzel in the film. Absolutely worth seeing. It may be the best basketball film on my list, and the best film.
Spike Lee manages, I find, to get the best performances out of Denzel Washington.
Oh.
Outside of, if you ever, Malcolm X, growing up with I remember watching it in school because I had to, I think I was in high school, early high school, because I had to watch it because I had a presentation on Malcolm X, and I fell in love with Malcolm X. It was one of my favorite, and still one of my favorite Spike Lee films that not a lot of people talk about, but it's a great movie, and he's great, and he's got game, and I'm pretty sure he's an inside man as well, and he's so underrated, and he's got game. That film is actually one of the most gorgeous American films made in the 90s by an American filmmaker, and no one talks about it, which is, I know it's a little long and overwrought, and if you don't appreciate basketball, you won't like it, because it kind of, is inaccessible.
You think so? I don't know.
It's a beautiful film.
There's so many elements that work in this film, in addition to just the way that the gameplay itself is shot. There's a wonderful character drama at the heart of it. There's a sense of narrative poetry between the way between the film's opening montage and the way it closes, with something that is, again, not realistic, not grounded in reality, but is grounded in emotion and feeling. And it's that non-tactile, non-literal style of filmmaking that is just so beautiful, and is what I just took from this movie. I am so glad I got to spend 2 hours watching it.
No, I agree with you. I'm talking about people who don't necessarily watch basketball, or they don't appreciate Spike Lee.
The other stuff, though.
But you're right. But people who don't appreciate Spike Lee's quote unquote filmmaking, right?
Okay.
to me, I agree. I love the ending of that film because, like you said, it's non-literal. It is an ending open to interpretation and almost a magic realism quality to it.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's what makes it so great. And it's just gorgeous to look at. And the performances, like, I think Famke Jensen is just pretty great in it. Or is it Mila Jovovich? Oh, I got those two confused. It's Mila Jovovich, right?
You were talking to the wrong person. I'm so bad with names.
Yeah. But that and Denzel Washington and, again, Ray Allen did a fantastic job. Apparently you wanted originally Kobe, but the schedule wouldn't work out. There is an alternate reality where Kobe Bryant is playing Jesus Shuttleworth.
That plays so well into, like, the low-key rivalry that was between Ray Allen and Kobe for a little while.
Yeah.
Because I think they were both straight out of high school prospects that went to the NBA, or maybe Ray Allen had a year.
I think Ray Allen went to school. But there is almost, I talked about it, there's almost an element of just that fantasy realism and kind of the lyrical qualities of it. When I talked about the previous about Powell and Pressburger, another director I'm going to bring it back up. If you've never had a chance to watch Powell and Pressburger, people out there, watch the movie Peeping Tom and A Matter of Life and Death and Canterbury Tales.
You have managed in this podcast to tie Uncle Drew to a 4-hour German expressionist road movie.
5.5, almost 6. And, yeah, well, filmmaking is not a thing you could tie with...
Powell and Pressburger for you guys.
But I think he even mentioned specifically that he took references from them into He's Got Game, because there's a magic realism lyrical quality to the way the material is presented, which is like what those old films are like. And that's what makes Spike Lee so interesting. He simultaneously is his own auteur, but he drags from so many things it's almost impossible to kind of pinpoint who his influences are. But you know what a Spike Lee movie is. Spike Lee, to me, is the best person in American cinema who introduces the concept of heat. His films have just this precipitating quality of you can see almost heat sizzling off the frame. He's Got Games, got some of it, and Do the Right Thing has some of it.
Has loads of it.
Yeah. But yeah.
No, you're right. No, and magical realism is absolutely the right term for it.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's. I think we've said enough. I will move on to a film that has much less magical realism, and is without question a lesser film. But in today's modern NBA, unless your name is LeBron James or Kawhi Leonard, and you are a small forward, you're getting underserved, and you are probably underwhelming the team that has drafted you. So I am going with an underwhelming film that had lots of promise, tried to do a number of things, which is what you ask your wing to do. You have to guard all the positions, you have to shoot, you have to do 3 and D. This is a movie that tries to do all of that and winds up being the Jay Crowder of movies, and that is Gus Van Sant's Finding Forrester. It's my small forward.
You skipped Kevin Durant somehow.
Oh, you're
when
right.
you
Well,
mentioning...
I think he starts at power forward now, but
No, Draymond Green.
rotates.
Okay, death lineup, whatever.
Okay, you're fair.
But
My apologies to Kevin Durant.
Kevin Durant, you know, he's literally just right now. He's trying to getting his own road trip with his own people to come on.
If Kevin Durant, all I can hope right now is Kevin Durant is on a burner Twitter account tweeting at Boys Be Critics.
I didn't know you could bring up Finding Forrester. I watched it maybe, I want to say specifically like 8 months back.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember it as a ripoff, kinda, of, let's say, we're going to throw Good Will Hunting with a reclusive author like J.D. Salinger together, but with a troubled young youth.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a movie that tries to tackle way too many things between, like, it has elements of being a basketball movie. It's about it's a Good Will Hunting story about a gifted young African-American kid in the inner city. It's about a reclusive shut-in. It tries to tackle elements of, like, structural racism, but mostly, like, passes it off as just, like, a teacher being personally jealous. And it's directed by Gus Van Sant, and it's not as good as the sum of its parts. But it has one element that lives on in my memory because I always, from a young age, aspired to be a writer. And it was one of the first movies I saw about a young kid getting taught how to be a writer. And the only thing I took from that is there was a scene from Sean Connery where he introduces the kid to his typewriter and has him tapping the keys. And he comes back in the room and goes, "For Christ's sakes, punch the keys." And then the kid starts hitting him really hard. And to this day, I hit my keys really hard when I write, to the perpetual irritation of my wife.
I remember, like, Sean Connery's apartment. I'm like, I would want to live in that reclusive, dingy, for like a couple of months. That's all I remember from it.
No, that's fair. It's the Jay Crowder of basketball movies, so.
You want to talk about a terrible one, the worst of the movie that I watched that you didn't watch?
Okay.
There's this movie called Eddie, where Whoopi Goldberg is a die-hard New York Knicks fan. So she gets the most convoluted way of becoming an honorary coach when she, I think, hits like a half-court shot, like a free throw shot or half-court shot, but she wins at everyone else. And she becomes the coach of the Knicks through a series of convoluted meetings. Dennis Farina plays the coach, leaves, and Frank Langella is like this Texan, like Big Bob, who becomes the new owner, and he makes it the coach so he can get ratings to go up, and then not even through any legal parameters or go through the steps, decides to sell the team. At the end of the season, he gives it like 1 year, gives up on the team. And if they make the playoffs, he sells the team, so she gets to the front court and she's like, alright everyone, she stands in the middle of the court, if we win, the team's going to be sold, but I'm going to do it my best because I'm a Knicks fan that we win. It is horribly convoluted. The person who made it doesn't understand anything about basketball. It is some of the worst basketball scenes in film that I've seen directed. It's just lifeless. And yeah, there's no reason this film... Don't even make it your coach. You don't want a lifeless coach who can't relate to his players or understand what is happening or how it's happening, and after a year will be fired.
Saying this is the small forward of the Sacramento Kings right now.
Who is a small forward?
I don't know, but I just picked a team that's just been stuck in a...
I was going to say Omar Cassie, but he left.
No disrespect to whoever actually is their small forward, but the Kings have been in a funk ever since Chris Webber, to go back to him.
It's not their fault, it's the ref's fault. They were bought.
They should have had a ring. They should have one ring and one banner in that arena.
Yeah. No, that wasn't good. And yeah, so don't watch Eddie. The only interesting thing out of Eddie, to me, that I found fascinating was that Frank Langella and Whoopi Goldberg met on the set of that film, and they were married for 7-8 years.
I just don't know how you can take I don't know how you can take the premise where Whoopi Goldberg becomes the coach of the Knicks and make something that's boring. That should be fun.
There's a subplot about this really arrogant point guard is a star who doesn't do anything, so they get the old point guard to come in to kind of win the team to will the other young point guard to become better at his job. It just goes through the paint by numbers of those 90s inspirational films, but without understanding the core conceit or getting to the thematic issues of the film itself without presenting something new or interesting. There's nothing going on. Do not watch Eddie. Out of all the basketball films we watched, it is the worst.
There are some really bad basketball movies. One that is not a bad movie, and I was almost going to segue from Chris Webber because this is my power forward. For a power forward, I am going for the Dennis Rodman type. Raw, lean, high energy, is your trash talker and your team's motor. This is Dennis Rodman. This is Draymond Green. This is White Men Can't Jump.
I was going to guess White Men Can't Jump. Let me do my little, let me figure it out. But yeah, White Men Can't Jump.
This is not the best movie on my team. This certainly doesn't have the best filmmaking technique. Some of the basketball scenes are a little stale where they just bump shoulder to shoulder and trash talk each other for extended periods of time, then step back and hit jump shots. But this movie's a lot of fun. Rosie Perez kills it as Woody Harrelson's girlfriend. Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes. They made other films together that didn't work. They work so well together in this film.
I really like Rosie Perez. Going back to Spike Lee, Do the Right Thing, Mookie!
And forgotten people from the 90s who really should be remembered.
She was in a film by Peter Weir, I think, directed Truman Show, which Jeff Bridges called Fearless, where she plays, I'm not going to spoil anything, but she plays a woman who survived the plane crash with Jeff Bridges, and they both go through some sort of survivor's trauma guilt, and she is so good in that movie. She actually got nominated for supporting actress, and she kind of disappeared, which is really unfortunate. Yeah. And then I was like, she reminds me kind of Marissa Tomei. They kind of play these quintessential New York women who play the foil to the boyfriend, quote unquote. Yeah. And apparently they were in a film together that I had no idea about, but I have not seen it yet. But there's a Marissa Tomei and Rosie Perez film. But I agree with you. The trash talk in White Man Can't Jump is the best trash talk in any of the basketball films I've seen. Mm-hmm. It tries to do that Spike Lee thing where it tries to film hot, where it's kind of shot on Venice Beach, so everyone's sticky and the sun is coming off the asphalt and the waves are going around. But it doesn't get to the level of Spike Lee. But there's a narrative thrust in it. There's an element of why these characters are doing a certain thing. They have their own subplots and their own character developments of why they want to accomplish certain things. I do like the kind of slight twist and turns, even though they're very telegraphed as to terms of what is happening. Mm-hmm. And yeah, their chemistry is great between all three of them, Rosie Perez, Woody Harrelson, and Wesley Snipes.
But I wanted to actually jump off the point you made about the Rosie Perez character and playing the thankless girlfriend role. Because I want to just go back to Love and Basketball really briefly and talk about the films of Gina Pryce Blythewood one more time. Which is, in both those films, they have a woman at the center of it who the story is built around. She is the narrative driving force, both in Beyond the Lights and Love and Basketball. Both these films are romantic melodramas, and the male character has so much to do. They have so much identity. They have their own family dramas, their own goals, their own aspirations, and each film ends with the female characters' dreams and priorities taking the precedent and them taking a step back because they love them, because they care, not to give too much away about either film. But it just makes me, it becomes maddening to watch these 90s films where the women are essentially cardboard.
They give them some sort of subplot where it's enough to fill whatever checkboxes they need to, but it's so perfunctory, and it's so obvious when you get to modern day culture, right? Because Rosie Perez has this subplot in the film which is supposed to give her character an agency, but doesn't necessarily work as much. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you. It gets egregiously so obvious as you get further into modern culture, where women are, fortunately enough now, getting to a position where they can have films in the forefront, where they can direct, or they can be key components of a crew, where they can write. And movies in the 90s just become so achingly obvious that so much of the forefront is kind of given this white male egoism.
Because they're written and produced and directed by white dudes.
And guess what has happened in modern culture?
You were right. And yes, if you were a screenwriter or a producer, or anyone who has power in making movies, and you have a thankless, joyless female supporting role, watch Love and Basketball. Watch Beyond the Lights. You will learn so much about how to give these people three-dimensional identity and still have a strong central character that you can build the thrust of your film around. She does it perfectly.
You should give her more roles. 90s women directed by African-American women directors are such a forgotten thing. Like Eve's Bayou, or The Watermelon Woman. They're so good. And I wish more people watch them. I really do.
But people are too busy watching the movies made by straight white men. Speaking of straight white men, it's time to cast my center. And I shouldn't say cast, but draft my center. And who better to play the center on a championship basketball team than a lumbering white man? It worked so well for the Michael Jordan era Chicago Bulls, who had Luke Longley. The Warriors have just essentially been rotating lumbering white guys.
But now they have the best center in the league, who is not white somehow.
That's correct. They because the NBA is getting ever more ridiculous and one-sided.
Yeah.
Until that time, they were rotating lumbering white guys from Australia or Europe, and my lumbering white center is, of course, the film Hoosiers, which is about a team of lumbering white guys who play lumbering white slow basketball while Gene Hackman yells obscenities, the assistant coach gets drunk. I don't have any particular love for this movie, but who has particular love for the white centers who tend to always be somehow pigeonholed on these great teams?
I can't even contribute anything, because I have a bonus film which you haven't talked about that I have seen.
Okay.
But I have not seen Hoosiers.
You haven't seen Hoosiers?
I've talked about all these films, but I haven't seen, like, the one people know.
This is defined Bill Simmons' childhood, I feel like. Along with Field of Dreams.
I'm not Bill Simmons, so... But yeah, what did you think of Hoosiers? You've just said it, but do you want to expel anything further?
To be honest, I didn't rewatch Hoosiers in prep for the podcast. I've seen it in its entirety through, like, multiple watchings when it was on TV a lot. It's a basketball movie where most of the times I just think, like, man, 70s basketball was pretty dry. It doesn't have a special place in my heart. I will say, I think the director also made Rudy, and I love Rudy.
It's Sean Astin in both, so those are just Rudy.
I think just Rudy, but Rudy is the winner of that director's career, I think.
So you don't recommend anyone to watch Hoosiers?
If you do, I would recommend you read Spike Lee's book on basketball and film, where he just does a takedown piece on Hoosiers of how it's about the all-white team that goes and plays the inner city blacks and beats them to win the championship, and essentially is just fuck Hoosiers. That would be why.
All right, I'm gonna do my bonus round because there's the film I haven't seen. You've got your top 5. I'm gonna throw in my referee, because they're quite literal, but not even just a metaphorical one. There's a film from '95 called Forget Paris.
Yep.
And if you're like, what is Forget Paris? Well, you will probably forget this. But if you ever wonder what a Billy Crystal film in the vein of Woody Allen would look like, which is also a kind of ripoff, or not ripoff, but just another iteration of When Harry Met Sally, there's a '99 film called Forget Paris, which Billy Crystal starred in and directed.
Oh, really?
He directed Forget Paris, where Billy Crystal plays an NBA ref. And weirdly enough, it has the most NBA cameos I have seen, but simultaneously the least amount about NBA. It is a therapeutic way of associating himself with the NBA, but instead of being a diehard fan, which Billy Crystal is, he's a huge fan of the LA Clippers. Billy Crystal is a ref in this film, and he's in love with him. Sorry, yeah. So the film actually introduces a ton of cameos. It goes from everyone from, like, Bill Laimbeer to Isaiah Thomas, the Bad Boy Pistons, to David Robinson to Charles Barkley to Kurt Rambis to like run TMC in Golden State, speaking of Golden State, with Chris Mullins Hardaway. And a whole slew of other people I can't necessarily remember right at this instant. But kind of brings out this construction of someone's certain obsession and how it can bring issues into a new burgeoning relationship, wherein if they're replaced from their traditional love of certain things or their passion of certain things, how these people can kind of come into a new context and not know the previous life they left behind. And when they do come back to that new life, what issue can arise from it. The cinematography is shockingly really gorgeous in this film.
Quite pretty, yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy, the guy did the cinematography, a guy named Don Burgess. Before this, he didn't do much except for one film that people may remember. Okay. Small little film called Forrest Gump. But and then after Forrest Gump, he finally started becoming more noticeable, and he started making other films like Castaway and Amazing Spider-Man. I think he's doing the Aqua movie as the cinematography, but that's one of the hallmarks. Okay. Yeah, it's one of the hallmarks of the film with the cinematography. But Billy Crystal has a pretty decent cinematic eye. Some of the representation, some of the things he shoots are really interesting in an unconventional way that you wouldn't expect someone to shoot something. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's like Woody Allen by the way of Billy Crystal. Woody Allen uses like a therapeutic neuroticism to turn towards family drama, their own creepy sexual things, but Billy Crystal turns it towards his own passions, which is basketball, but presenting it rather than a fan, a basketball referee.
Just kind of stuck in the minutia of it, and the film has, I haven't seen all of it, but one thing I really enjoyed about it is it has like a joyful nihilism and sadness to it. Like part of the fun of Billy Crystal being a ref is not just that he gets to riff with all of the NBA players as he like runs beside at waist level to them, but just having like montages of fans booing and jeering and heckling this man and him just standing in and enduring. It actually made me feel slightly guilty of the amount of times I have booed refs, even though I'm usually watching on a TV set. But also, the setup of this film that he has to go to Paris because it's where he is going to bury his dead father.
Who is American?
And his dead father gets lost on the plane, and that's how they meet. It's strange and sad, and I still have to finish it. It was the basketball movie I didn't get through because I went and watched Love and Basketball, which I don't regret that decision in any way. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's definitely it's a forgotten 90s rom-com that's...
If you just wanted Lesser When Harry Met Sally, which has one of the most strange police escort scenes I've ever seen in a film.
Okay.
And I am not going to spoil it for you, but also something that involves a pigeon, which is pretty funny. Separate scenes, by the way. Forget Paris. Some interesting shots. Billy Crystal reverting things on his head. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, now they talk about that scene, is in it as well.
You know the one thing that actually this movie got me thinking about? Because it's filled with NBA cameos, as are a number of the films that we watched that were built in the early 2000s and 90s. Spike Lee got access to all the NBA players, which made sense. But the Lakers gave their rights up to the little tiny film of Love and Basketball. They gave it up to Celtic Pride, Celtic Pride, which, to go full circle, was the first movie ever written by Judd Apatow before he completely changed the landscape of what film comedy could be. The NBA was incredibly willing in this period to loan out its brand for recognition. It was a really young league. Yeah. And I think that gamble paid off because the NBA players became big-time celebrities. They weren't making huge money, so they were... Literally, Reggie Miller was hosting a late-night TV show in Indiana.
But because, like, the thing with white people was they were scared of African-Americans. Michael Jordan was the first celebrity that could kind of cross over, be this wholesome character that wouldn't scare the white audiences. In the 90s, they at least presented it to white people when you were trying to sell things so it wouldn't be as scary, so it'd be universal. Because there was a ton of TV rights and branding rights and corporate rights and product rights. And that's like the unbridged frontier. Because at that point, at least football can be presentable to the white people. Baseball could have been presented to the white people. Basketball is one of those things that kind of scared them because it had an element of,
This sounds conspiratorial, but it was a period in the early 2000s, especially when Allen Iverson was league MVP, where people were doing hot takes about how the league was too black, and they implemented dress codes and things like that. But you're right. I think Space Jam really was the success story of the strategy, which was they kept licensing their rights, just playing the crapshoot of saying eventually we're going to get a movie that's really going to land, really going to connect with audience. And now the NBA is one of the most popular sports with people our age who grew up on Space Jam, who bought into the Jump Like Mike videos and things like that. I think Space Jam really had a big effect in stirring up a generational love for basketball.
Sports like basketball and soccer, they're important to people not even in North America but around the world. Because they're the easiest sports to play when you're necessarily like, I didn't grow up with much money, but when you're an individual who just needs a hoop and a ball.
You're right.
Basketball can't do that.
No,
basketball. Not basketball, sorry. Hockey. Football can't do that. Hockey can't do that. Even baseball can't do that.
Baseball, you really need a specific.
You need
field.
cleats, you need helmets, you need bats, you need ball, you need knee pads, and things of that nature. Those two sports are easy and ubiquitous. That's what David Stern's lasting legacy as the previous commissioner was with Michael Jordan was. And that's why the controversy around him and the gambling was so significant. He was at least the one face they could present to white people that didn't necessarily scare them. And Space Jam was that kind of bridging thing that took the element of basketball, but also marketing capabilities, and a cartoon that white people can safely associate with. It is a melting pot of everything.
I think you may be mixing 2 points there between like the racial component of the game, and that it is a sport that African Americans have just overwhelmingly excelled at over white people.
Yeah.
Even though the audience was majority white and continues, I think, to be majority white.
Depends.
But the accessibility of the game, you're right. It was a sport that was at the time very new. It still hasn't caught up to soccer, hasn't even caught up to American football in the States, but is growing rapidly, in part because it's so accessible. But I do think, they really had to push the brand, especially in the 90s. This was a era where we forget, but I believe one of Michael Jordan's NBA finals, at the height of Michael Jordan, got split screened with OJ driving a van for 2 hours. That's how little the NBA that's how little influence the NBA held in the cultural zeitgeist at that time.
But yeah, Michael Jordan, not to say he saved it, but at least he brought a faith that made white people comfortable. And then you had movies after that, like Mike, and things that just kind of solidified why they could feel comfortable with it. And yeah,
is Like Mike the last one to do it since Space Jam? Because I think it's Like Mike, and then I think we're all the way to Uncle Drew, which Uncle Drew doesn't actually have NBA branding, to the best of my knowledge.
Mike is almost like a spiritual successor to Space Jam, because the entire premise is the kid gets Michael Jordan's shoes, gets struck by lightning, and becomes Michael Jordan, right?
You're right. And it was targeted at the kids who grew up on Space Jam.
Yeah, like us.
Yeah, they came out about 10 years later.
Yeah, like Little Bow Wow on that, right? So.
Yeah.
Oh man, speaking of your bonus six man, Joanna Man.
That was the movie when the NBA said, no, we're not licensing our property to absolutely everything.
That's all you need about Joanna Man. Please do not look up Joanna Man. Do not watch Joanna Man. Do not have anything to associate with Joanna Man. But I'm sure Scarlett Johansson would love the role of Joanna Man.
The NBA gave their rights to Celtic Pride and what was the movie you named, Eddie?
Yeah.
And said no to Joanna Man. That's all you need to know. Joanna Man.
Transphobic trash, and it is not good. It's at early 2000s, everything is equal, so we can equally make fun of everything. And now we've realized the backlash and issues of why it is problematic when it was making fun of everything, then it is cool and hip, and it is progressive to do such a thing. We've really learned from the South Park era, haven't we? Maybe it is not best to say the best politics is no politics and just making fun of everything. We've raised a generation of sociopaths for the most part.
But a lot of them are basketball fans now. So that's a plus.
Yeah.
Oh! I will give one more bonus round if you don't mind, because I will pick my coach. I will give my team a coach, and I'm going to base my coach off of the Steve Kerr model, which is you want someone who attained, in some ways, greatness in the 90s. Though this is a film that I will say attained greatness, but never attained prestige. Was acclaimed and loved for the 90s. I think it was literally Roger Ebert's favorite film of the 1990s, and that is a documentary, Hoop Dreams.
Hoop Dreams is fantastic.
Hoop Dreams is my Steve Kerr coach that is going to lead this team and explain the bitter realities of economics, ground them, keep them strong, and have that just deep emotional resonance that you will hold the way any coach will in a young player's life.
Hoop Dreams is great. If you can watch Hoop Dreams, watch Hoop Dreams.
Especially now, watch Hoop Dreams.
Yeah.
This has been fun. This has been,
So out of all the sports, depending on which sports film you've seen,
okay,
which sport do you think has the best, across the board, consistently good films?
I think it's boxing.
Boxing.
I think boxing with the Rocky series, with Raging Bull. Boxing is really good for individual character pieces because it's the metaphor's right there. It's one person locked in a ring with someone else, and they're perpetually fighting their demons.
You ever see the Alley film with Steven Soderbergh with Will Smith? It's kind of an underrated film. It's really good, actually. It has some really good components and elements to it in the cinematography and directing. Fantastic.
Don't have a big love for the baseball films.
I just don't like base. Yeah, I find that movies I think it's Bull Durham and League of Their Own to be kind of dated, but
I think probably the best one in baseball is probably Field of Dreams.
oh yeah.
But yeah, no, I'll stick with the basketball and boxing movies. Even like there's a couple good football movies.
How about golf?
You know what's amazing? I'm thinking
Instead
of
of
I'm thinking
Tin
of
Cup and Happy Madison.
I'm thinking of the Shia LaBeouf one from the late 2000s. Do you remember that? It was set in like the 1920s, and he had to take up golf to save his like family farm. It's based on a true story about this kid who like won the majors.
No.
Shia LaBeouf.
You put Legend of Bagger Vance in my head, and that is not right.
Nope.
No.
Not
That
Legend
has
of
to do
Bagger
with
Vance.
golf, right?
That's a golf
Coming
movie,
back
yeah.
to Will Smith, yeah, okay.
Golf movie. That's about it. Would you like to share? I should make a little program announcement. You will not be joining me on the next podcast, which has me very sad. But would you care to share where you will be and why you will be going?
I will be in South Korea, city outside Seoul called Busan, but I will be in Seoul as well. But anyone who lives now probably will. It'll be past the fact, so I'll be back. But the film that I co-directed and co-wrote is having its Asian premiere.
That is awesome.
At a fantasy festival out there. So I'll be going to South Korea in 2 days for 2 weeks, and exploring the sights and sounds.
And eating all of the South Korean barbecue.
Oh yes.
What's the film called?
The film is called Stand By. Maybe when it becomes publicly released in a couple of months or so, we'll send a link for it so people could watch it. This is, I think, our 7th festival selection.
That's correct.
Yeah, so thank you. So yeah, it should be fun. It should be exciting. I have never been to Asia before, although I am of Asian descent. I shall go and have the most amount of fun possible.
And the film does have a Facebook page. We'll plug a little plug for the Standby Facebook page.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. This has been a lot of fun. I will miss you. I hope you have a great trip.
I will try my best to have a great trip. Unfortunately, my flight back is 22 hours, and I'll have to be stuck in America for 6 hours. But please do not have a civil war in the 6 hours that I am there.
Why are you going to literally the most hostile places on the planet?
I was thinking about this the other day, where if I get stuck in LAX, which is where my layover is, what is the best way of coming back home? And I have a couple of friends in LA. The best scenario would be I can convince them to take me to like Tijuana, then find a flight either back, or I would have the Mad Max X thing where I would have to go through like Oregon, Northern California, and
Up the Blue Coast?
yeah, Oregon, and then come up to Vancouver. Either or of those scenarios would be fun. Maybe I can find the Golden State Warriors and Sacramento Kings, and we could unite and take a Mad Max road up while we try to liberate the rural parts of Oregon.
You could take the Kings and win that banner back from the Staples Center.
Go find Tim Donaghy in a prison somewhere. It'll be great. Where's Tim Donaghy right now, you think? He's clearly not in jail still, but...
That is a thought that occupies absolutely none of my mental time.
That is surprising that Tim Donaghy is not, like, in an era of conspiracy theories and people like that getting a platform, has not existed in more of a YouTube online. Like, I imagine there is some sort of podcast YouTube channel where he's just talking about current NBA conspiracies and conflating it back to what used to be sort of thing.
I don't know if everyone else has your, like, deep held feeling that the NBA is perpetually rigged by officiating. But if there is, it would be a great podcast.
But that's the thing we've got to say about recent culture is every subsect of everything has a stringent, hardcore supportive fans who believe something is either a conspiracy or something is working against them. Mm-hmm. I feel if Tim Donaghy started a conspiracy podcast or conspiracy YouTube channel, there would be some people who are basketball fans and just general conspiracy theorists who would follow it.
Well, that is good career advice for Tim Donaghy.
Wherever he is.
In all sincerity, I hope you have a great time. Congratulations. I will miss you on the podcast. Thank you for listening to The Boys Who Would Be Critics. We'll be back next week. Well, at least I'll be back with a guest into Moon's Place. We'll be discussing The Rock's new thriller Skyscraper, and then mixing things up with a thriller of an entirely different sort, Alfred Hitchcock's psychosexual thriller Frenzy. That's right, Alfred Hitchcock made a sex thriller in the 1970s, so give it a watch, and we'll hope you'll listen in for our discussion. Until then, see you next week. 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 See you next week.